Greetings from the East Tennessee History Center, located on Gay Street in downtown Knoxville. The History Center is a public-private partnership between the Knox County Public Library and the nonprofit East Tennessee Historical Society and Museum, and it works to benefit the entire region. The building houses the East Tennessee Historical Society and its Museum of East Tennessee History, the Calvin M. McClung Historical Collection, the Tennessee Archive of Moving Image and Sound, and the Knox County Archives. Within its walls, visitors can find extensive genealogical records, manuscripts, maps, and histories dating back to before the establishment of the state of Tennessee. Interdisciplinary works from local historians acknowledge the roles race, gender, and class play in society and highlight the diverse perspectives of the region. Stop by today and uncover your past.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liz Hicks, and I will be moderating the session Princesses and Warriors with Kaylyn Bayron, Sarah Henning, and Amy Tintera. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. On behalf of Humanities Tennessee, I would like to welcome you to this session and thank our key sponsors, Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Ingram Content Group, Tennessee Arts Commission, Vanderbilt University, and Parnassus Books. Be sure to watch the chat for the links to purchase books from Parnassus. These purchases help the festival and help keep it free. There will also be a donate button where you can donate to the Southern Festival and keep this wonderful tradition going. Also, you will be able to post questions on the Attendify website, or on Facebook. As always, please be courteous and keep questions and comments positive. At this time, I have the great pleasure of introducing our authors. Kailyn Bayran is an author and classically trained vocalist. She grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. When she's not writing, you can find her listening to Ella Fitzgerald on loop, attending the theater, watching scary movies, and spending time with her kids. She currently lives in San Antonio, Texas with her family. Cinderella Is Dead is her debut novel. Welcome, Kaylyn.
Thank you.
Sarah Henning is a recovering journalist who has worked for the Palm Beach Post, Kansas City Star, Associated Press, among others. When not writing, she runs ultra marathons, hits the playground with her two kids, hangs out with her husband, Justin, who doubles as her long-suffering IT department. Sarah lives in Lawrence, Kansas, hometown of Langston Hughes, William S. Burroughs, and a really good basketball team. She's the author of Sea Witch as well as Sea Witch Rising, Throw Like a Girl, and her latest book is The Princess Will Save You. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Amy Tintera is the New York Times bestselling author of the reboot duology and the Ruined Trilogy. Her novels have been translated into 16 languages and sold into more than 20 territories. She lives in San Antonio, Texas, with her very excited dog. And her new book, All These Monsters, is out now with a sequel to follow in 2021. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
We're so excited to hear from all three of you today. Would you start by giving a quick pitch of your latest book? Kaylyn, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Yeah. So the elevator pitch is Cinderella Is Dead is queer Black girls team up to overthrow the patriarchy in the former kingdom of Cinderella. But to kind of just expand on that a little, Cinderella Is Dead is the story of 16-year-old Sophia Grimmins. She is a young woman living in the kingdom of Versailles, which is the place where Cinderella lived and died about 200 years before. Cinderella's story has become the backbone of this society, and young women are expected to follow in the footsteps of the fabled princess. And Sophia is having none of it. She is in love with her best friend, and is preparing to attend her very first ball, which is now a mandatory event. And kind of there at the castle, she makes some choices that put her on a collision course with Versailles' ruler and lead her to some really devastating truths about the society that she lives in. And it's a fun ride. It's a dark, kind of twisted fairy tale, and it kind of reimagines and deconstructs some popular fairy tale tropes. And at its core, it's a story that tells queer Black girls that they are enough just as they are.
That is fabulous in so many ways. Thank you so much. Sarah?
So The Princess Will Save You is a sort of gender swap damsel in distress tale inspired by The Princess Bride. So it's not a retelling as much as it is inspired by. And it tells the story of Princess Amarante, who is also in love with her best friend. Yay! And everybody seems to know it but her. And when her father dies, she is poised to inherit her kingdom. However, she must get married to actually access her power. And she doesn't want to do that. She's in love with her best friend. She's 16. She thinks it's stupid. And this sort of setup hasn't happened in 1,000 years. So, of course, everybody is trying to kill their wife and get at her so that they can have a second kingdom. And so her true love is kidnapped to force her hand. And so she decides that instead of playing the game, she's just going to go get him. And that's exactly what happens. The princess goes after the male damsel and chaos ensues. And I hope that if you read it, that you'll see a little bit of The Princess Bride. I took the things that I liked about it, and we can talk about that later with the questions, but really tried to explore flipping the damsel idea and setting it against a very hyper-patriarchal world, because I think that you can't really examine the idea of the damsel and flip it without setting up your heroine to also kind of feel the pressures that a damsel would feel, like lack of agency or just no control over her own life and suffering in the patriarchy. So that's sort of the elevator pitch for The Princess Will Save You.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think we can all relate a little bit to that for sure.
Possibly.
Amy?
So All These Monsters is a sci-fi novel set in an alternate version of our world, where in the year 2012, mysterious monsters known as Scrabs appeared in the UK and quickly spread around the globe, but especially went to Europe and the UK. And the story follows 17-year-old Clara, who decides to join one of these monster hunting squads because it is better than staying at home with her abusive father. And it follows her as she joins this squad of elite monster hunters and goes off to Paris to fight them.
That sounds like a great adventure. That's wonderful. Well, what inspired you all to write these stories? What was your spark?
For me, I really loved fairy tales as a kid. I was super obsessed with fairy tales. One of the first books that I just took around with me everywhere was a collection of fairy tales that had a bunch of different versions of Cinderella and Snow White and kind of all of those fairy tales. And I also grew up in the 80s and 90s of that kind of peak Disney princess era. And I love those movies and stories so much, but it was really obvious that there were no Black people in these stories. It was, you get into fairy tales and you want to imagine yourself as those characters, and I didn't see anybody who looked like me. So I think that's kind of where it started for me. And then, I don't think we had a Black princess until Princess Tiana. And I was almost 30 when that came out. So So my kids have that, but I didn't have that. And so it really wasn't until I started reading the work of Toni Morrison and Octavia Butler and Zora Neale Hurston that I saw stories that were by and for Black folks. So when I decided to do this retelling, I knew that I wanted it to center a Black girl, but it was important to me that she had agency, that she was complex. I needed her to be someone that kind of younger version of myself, who just desperately wanted to see a Black girl in a ball gown on the cover of a book would be excited to read about. So that's kind of where it started for me. It wasn't really a spark as much as it was this kind of like smoldering kind of fire, that kind of built over the years. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll go next, I guess, if we're going to stay in alphabetical order. So, I'm also a child of the 80s and 90s. Kaylyn, I think we're about the same age. And so.
Uh-oh. She's gone frozen.
You froze just a minute, Sarah.
Oh my goodness, why am I freezing while I'm talking? I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Oh.
We're frozen again.
This has not happened to me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I don't know why. I guess 2 kids in virtual school while I'm doing this is probably not helpful. Okay, anyway, if you can hear me, I love The Princess Bride, love it very much. But then as an adult, after seeing it 30 bajillion times, there's something about...
Oh, we're frozen one more time.
Hopefully last time.
There we go.
Okay. I feel like I'm putting this together in pieces. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I was really frustrated with Buttercup and her character arc because she's very feisty in the beginning of the story in both the book and the movie. And then, spoiler, by the end, when she's married in the sham of a wedding to Humperdinck, she has a dagger in a private room and she's just going to end it. She's just so distraught. And I know that's what they were trying to get across. But the previous Buttercup would have taken the dagger and fought her way out of the castle. Like, she would have done it. And so I wanted to write a princess that used the dagger, just used it. So while I was deconstructing that, I was looking at the things I really love about that tale, but also wanted to examine all of the problems because it took from all of our favorite fairy tales. That's the whole point. That was what William Goldman was trying to do. He was trying to write a story for his daughters, and it's really beloved because of that, because we recognize all these fairy tale tropes within it and the ways he deconstructed it. But I think you can deconstruct things even further with what today's society is like.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if I answer this question different, like every time, like where the idea for all these monsters came from, because it was very much one of those books that like a lot of ideas sort of came together and there were a lot of different drafts and a lot of different ideas. But basically what it came down to is that I wanted to tell a story about the cycle of abuse and about a character escaping the cycle of abuse within a sort of sci-fi or fantasy story. And I chose sci-fi because I write both. And so that was basically it, was like, how can I sort of make this a relatable, very grounded story, but while they're out there fighting monsters and having fun, And so that was sort of how it all came together eventually after many drafts.
That's wonderful. I kind of have adopted a saying, once you see the monster, you can't unsee it. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think that probably applies in many ways to your story.
It does, for sure.
With all of your stories, there is a more than meets the eye element. What do you hope readers will see when they read your book?
I just honestly, I just love a good hidden history. I think that when we look at fairy tales like Cinderella, we're kind of zoomed in on a very specific part of the story. Kind of when we start, our characters have already kind of chosen a side. We already know who the bad guys are. So we're, and then in the end, they kind of ride off into the sunset, and that's where it is. But I like to kind of zoom out and look at those beginnings and sometimes what happens after the happily ever after. So I think those are the most interesting parts of the story to me. And so what I tried to do is I tried to show readers that there's more to the story and that it's been there all along. You just have to kind of shift the lens a little. I think that message feels kind of timely. And I wish it didn't, but it does. And so I think you have the story as it's presented to you, and then you have the truth. And I don't know, I think I'd like readers to kind of see that critical thinking is necessary, especially when we're talking about our histories. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think with The Princess Will Save You, it's kind of difficult for me because, it's multi-POV. So you see a lot of different points of view. And I hope that when you're in somebody else's point of view, like beyond Amarande, the main character, that you kind of get a sense of why they are tracking the direction they are. I think that one thing that we need to explore more is just people's motivations. There's with Sea Witch, I was always saying the villain is the hero in their own story, right? I'm not the first person to say that. That's like a common thing. But I think that looking at everyone's motivations and just trying to survive in this world that is complicated is important. And then, as I mentioned in my first statement, just about the patriarchy in general, I think just examining how that affects women and the choices that they make. In this case, the most powerful woman in her entire country literally cannot do what she wants. And it's stupid. And just kind of looking at that and the norms and structures that hold us down. And that's one of the things about fantasy that's so cool, is that you can write it into a fantasy and then apply it to today's world, as well as to the history of our planet. And I think that's a really fun thing to deconstruct. And, if you have a good time while you're reading the story, then maybe it'll kind of sink in a little bit, and you read enough of these stories like this, and eventually your worldview shifts a little bit, maybe. Which is, when we write for teenagers, you have to think about through a teenage eye how they're reading these stories. I think when I was a teenager, YA wasn't really a thing. We didn't have characters like this.
Yeah.
We had The Outsiders, and we read that in class. There was no real YA centric idea. And so I hope that teens and adults can get things out of my books that apply to their current world.
Thank you. Yes. Amy?
I hope that readers see that you can be strong even though you have made mistakes. I think, Clara is not a perfect character, and she's had a really rough home life, and she doesn't do that well in school. And it's not a book where they have superpowers or anything. These are all just regular kids. And I think that something I would like for people to take from that is that you can move on, and you can change the world, and you can do great things even if you've had a rough start, and your past does not always define you, and the choices that your parents made don't define you. And also that one of the really important things that I wanted to do in this book was express that there could be romance after trauma, because I think that's really important, that you can move out of one bad relationship and into a great one. And it's okay to make some mistakes and to move on.
That's a great thing to point out, because so often if you're in a bad relationship, you think that's it, I'm done.
Let's just give up. Yeah.
Madeline Engel once said, "You have to write the book that wants to be written. And if the book will be too difficult for grown-ups, then you write it for children." How does this quote speak to you as a young adult author?
Writing for young people is a joy and an honor, really. I think that quote speaks to the complexity of writing for children. I think I cannot tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, in the literary community that or imply that writing for children is easy, that it's a cop-out in some kind of way, which is just reductive and disrespectful. So whatever. But it's, the work that's being done in the children's literature space is groundbreaking. It is inclusive. It's empowering. It's empowering a new generation of kids by giving them windows and mirrors that they have been denied, especially kids from marginalized backgrounds, that they've been denied those windows and mirrors for a really long time. So I think we have a lot of work left to do, but I think that writing for children really is just, it's a way for us to kind of start to right some of those wrongs. And, I think writing for kids, it requires that you have a certain amount of respect for kids, that you kind of meet them where they're at, and that you don't dismiss their cares and their concerns just because they're kids. I take that responsibility really seriously, and I try my hardest to make sure that that the kids I write for feel seen and held by the work. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yes. And I am always amazed and appreciate so thoroughly the love that young adult authors have for young people. I've dedicated my life to working with young adults and championing young adult literature because of all the reasons you just named. Thank you. Sarah?
I don't know how I can really answer this because Kaylyn answered it so well. I don't know what to say. I guess I could talk briefly about, so the title, The Princess Will Save You, is actually the title, I literally spun off to my agent when I was like, hey, what if I do this thing? And it wasn't fully formed. And I thought, oh, that's going to change this whole time, and it didn't. And it's been so fascinating to see people talk about the title because, when I was a kid, it was not the princess who ever did the saving, literally ever. I remember watching the Robin Hood with Kevin Costner with the bad mullet, and Maid Marian comes out and she has a sword fight with him when he doesn't realize it's her. At the beginning, I was like, oh my God, that's the princess. That's awesome. I mean, I love Fox Robin Hood, but that was really cool. And so it's just crazy to me that in 2020, we can talk about these princesses doing these cool things. We're here on this panel. Kaylyn wrote this awesome book about this princess. Well, she's at a ball, not a princess. Yeah. We can talk about the patriarchy in this way when we talk about royalty and princesses and everything. And it's still just, it's weird to even talk about a girl taking agency. And it's just crazy to me, just crazy. So I don't have a good answer because Kaylyn knocked that out of the park, but I think I'm always really excited when I talk to real life teenagers who look at this book or any of my others and are like, that's really cool because I write for them and it is a joy and it is a privilege. And I love my adult readers, but I love hearing from kids because that's really who's in my brain when I'm writing it.
Absolutely. As you were talking, the movie Ever After came to mind. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite scenes is when they come upon the gypsies and they tell her that she could have whatever she could carry, and she picks the prince up to carry him away. And that's exactly what came to mind when you were talking. Amy?
So all of that, of course, that you guys said, you pretty well covered it. The only thing that I would say is that I think that especially in children's books and YA, that you can really blend serious subjects with sci-fi and fantasy, which I mean, maybe adult sci-fi fantasy authors would disagree with me, but they're not here. So I think that YA is really good at it. And I was not at all worried about putting a very serious abuse plotline into my sci-fi novel and be like, this is a fun novel and a serious novel and they can go together. And I feel like kids and teens they're fine with that. And it's something that maybe they even really enjoy.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's what's so wonderful about this YA revolution. these are books that teens and adults can love together. I think teens are such wonderful, complicated humans, and so often misunderstood. And I feel like YA literature really opens some doors of understanding, not just of the world, but for understanding teens themselves. Yeah. And so it's a wonderful bonus, I guess, to reading YA literature.
Yeah.
So you're all at different places in your journey as an author. What's something that you have learned from your journey, from this experience?
Oh gosh. Man, I think that this kind of community that I've found, this writing community, it's really been kind of one of those unexpected things. Like Cinderella Is Dead is my debut novel, and I wasn't really sure what to expect. But I've had so many wonderful people kind of reach out, and we get to talk about publishing. We get to talk about kids' books. We're there for each other to kind of laugh with and cry with because it's publishing. And so, I think the community that I've found during this kind of writing journey has been kind of unexpected and wonderful. But aside from that, this is going to sound ridiculous, but like a practical thing that I've learned is that taxes ain't no joke when you are a writer, okay? Like, I know there's not a lot of transparency in publishing about money, and there's nothing said really about taxes. I mean, I have a wonderful agent who kind of was like, look, you need to do this. But when you kind of look into it, I wish somebody had told me, like, sat down and said, this is exactly what you need to do. This is what it looks like. This is how it's going to be. And I know that's boring, like practical, advice, but like that's really something that I think people do not even think about. You're so busy, especially like with a first book, you're just kind of you're writing the book you want to write. It's not always about what you're making. And it's just about kind of getting the work out there. And then sometimes you get some money and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? And the tax code, I don't know what, like, it's a mess. And so definitely wish I had known that. And that's definitely something that came out of, like, not left field, but it was unexpected the way that it worked. So yeah, I know that's boring, but that's definitely something.
No, that's amazing that you said that. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before. And anytime I think that you're self-employed or an independent contractor or anything, paid with a 1099, however that goes. But the taxes are one of those burdens of life that seem to be an afterthought.
Yeah, it's a garbage fire for publishing people. But yeah, so.
Yeah, taxes. Wow. Because in publishing, I think this is something outsiders don't understand. We're not all, making, like, rolling in dough, and you never know exactly how much you're going to get paid or when, or, really at all. Like, it's very hard to plan literally anything. Literally up until a couple of weeks ago, I was working a full-time job and doing this, and everyone's like, aren't you to the point where, like, you can stop? And I'm like, I have a mortgage and 2 kids, and I never know when I'm going to get paid. Like, literally, I have 3 publishers. So that's something that's hard for people to understand. And also, it's like putting a monetary value on your creative space. It really changes your relationship with your art, because it's something that suddenly you have to support yourself with. And Amy can speak to this well more than me. She's done this for a long time. But taxes are real. Writers don't make a ton of money, and please don't steal our books. Get them from the library, because that does help us. Okay, so what else should I say that is practical about an author? I think that one of the things that is so cool about being an author is just that you create these worlds and then people live in them. So I was a journalist for a long time, it was in my bio. But like, I literally learned to never read the comments, like, on anything. And this was at a time when, like, newspaper comment sections before paywalls and stuff, like, there are lots of interaction. And so I had kind of learned to, like, forget that other people were reading it. And it's funny because, like, as a writer, I've had to, like, relearn that. And I'm not going to talk about Goodreads, but, you know, when people do reach out to you and they say that they love your work, like, I had a teenager, like a real live teenager, say that she loved They're Like a Girl, which is my other 2020 book, last night. And I was just like, oh, I just love when, like, actual real life people tell me that they enjoy this world, because I forget that I made this world sometimes for other people. Like, I do know I write for kids and everything, but, like, I think I'm sort of removed from the fact that they're experiencing it, which is sort of strange. Like, I don't know if you guys feel that way about your art, but it's sort of like I make it and then it's over here, and I don't think about it. But it's really cool to think that other people are slipping into our worlds and thinking about the things that we've all talked about just already here, and and spending their Friday night with that, and then with our characters and interacting with it and having it change things, because all of our books on shelves change things. I mean, Kaylynn wrote books for kids like her, and I'm writing books for, like, girls that never thought that they could go rescue the boy. So yeah, I'm just rambling now. Amy cut me off. Of course, now I don't cut off.
Yes, I think I'm the oldest in terms of publishing years, because I got my first book deal in 2012 and my debut was 2013. So I've been doing it for a little while. And the taxes are real for sure. And I got an accountant, like, right away, and ended up overpaying taxes my first year because I was so scared. I was like, just take all the money and you can just give it back later. I'm too scared of the IRS. So I recommend that accountant for sure for everyone. But then I think one of the things now, since I guess I'm like 7 years into publishing, which is crazy, is I think you kind of have to learn how to handle a lot of disappointment and a lot of, like, you have to be willing to, like, pivot and move on, I think, because I think that's one of the things when I talk to aspiring writers the most is they've been working on the same book forever, or they're, if they've had one book out and it didn't do well, they want to figure out how to fix it. And some things, like, something that I realized you can't really fix it all the time. Like, sometimes the very best thing you can do is just write the next book that you want to write. Like, just keep writing the stuff that you're passionate about. So that, I think that's the biggest thing, is just learning to manage your disappointment in the bad situations, which sounds sad, but I guess since I'm the oldest in publishing, that's yeah, that's the unfortunate advice.
Have since this crazy world entered this pandemic and the infamous year we've learned to know as 2020, have you all been doing any virtual school visits?
I have not, just because my books are pretty upper YA, so I don't tend to do a lot of school visits.
Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to do that yet, but I would love to do something like that. I know that was on the schedule before, in the before times, but yeah, that would be great. I love any kind of opportunity I get to talk to readers, to young readers. So yeah, I need somebody call me, like, get me on that. I'm ready to do that. So yeah.
Well, because I did have another 2020 book, I did get on the tail end of the first part of school being virtual and got to talk to some kids. And that was really great. It's very isolating for them to be in virtual school and to read a book together and experience and then talk to an author, I think is a really good thing for them right now, So I'd love to do more of them, more visits like this fall, because it just might keep on keeping on. Like, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
I know teachers right now are struggling to stay connected with their students. And I think bringing you all in to this virtual new world of teaching would be a great way for educators to connect with their students. Have you had a memorable interaction with a reader? I believe strongly in the power of connecting readers and authors together. Is there something that stands out in your mind of an interaction that you've had with one of your readers?
I had recently someone, so I have on my website, like you can send me an email and I'll send you a book plate, like a signed book plate. And but on that form, there's a little, like a comments section. And someone requested a book plate, but in the comments section, she said that, so I'm going to try to do this and I'm going to try really hard not to cry. So this reader read my book. And she said that it helped her come out to her mom. And so I think that, you know, you write these stories and you put them out into the world. And, you know, you hope that, you know, it resonates with people. You hope that people love it. But there are times when it really does make a real life, real world difference. And I not going to cry on Maine, but you know, it really just, it kind of affirmed my belief that I've always had, which is that, you know, books have the power to change the world. And the position that I'm in now as an author, I take that responsibility seriously. So yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, actually, so, I mean, the most memorable one is actually about Sea Witch, which is my debut in 2018. And it was an Indies Introduced book. So I got a chance to go to Children's Institute, which was really awesome. And then sign some books. And like my third person in line was a girl who's a bookseller from Maine. And she literally put the book down and she started crying, and I started crying too because she was crying. And then we started talking, and because Sea Witch deals a lot with loss, like the idea of losing someone. And I wrote it right after my sister died, and which I didn't put in the book. But if you look at the acknowledgments for Sea Witch Rising, it's in there. And she had just lost a family member, and said she just read, you know, the first part of the book and just started crying, and I started crying, and then we just like hugged, which we can't do now, which is terrible. But I told her, like, if you want me to sign books for your family, like, please let me know. And she did. Like, she went back to Maine, and then she shipped me some books, and I signed stuff for her family, for this family member that, like, the immediate family, for the people that she'd lost. And it was something very unexpected for me as a baby author to just literally, like, first event, have somebody say that they really felt something when they read my book, and that they understood what I was going through, even though I didn't like make it like extremely obvious in writing the book. Clearly those feelings were there, and they got in, and then they met her feelings where she was at. And I don't, you know, like, I don't know if I can top that like ever, but yeah, I think that was just incredible. And I hope that it made a difference, you know, being seen.
Absolutely. I saw a quote today: historians help you see, fiction writers help you feel. And that is one of the things that I think is so appealing about YA is no matter what genre, what the story is, you connect with it. You connect with the story and the characters. And you guys are my heroes. Amy?
So for me, I remember clearly it was with my debut novel, it was like the second day it was out, and I was doing an event, and I was actually feeling really bad because I so many people had told me like that my first book was going to have to be this huge success, and I needed to make the New York Times list, and I could tell that was not going to happen. It was not going to be a huge success, like straight out of the gate. This is day 2 that it's out, so I'm freaking out for no reason at this point, of course. But this mom comes up to me, and she's like, "My kid won't read anything, but she read Reboot like straight through. She loved it so much. Thank you so much." And I was like, I need to like stop letting other people define success for me. Like, I just published a book, and this this girl loved it. And so it just made me really realize that why I was doing it, why I was publishing books, and what I loved about my debut novel. And so I always remember that mom made me feel like so much better my first week of release, when I was feeling like I had to be this huge success straight out of the gate and who knows like why I felt that way.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we all miss most in the state of the world that it's in now, is that personal connection. And but I still feel like we can be connected through these books, and you never know who needs to hear your story, and whose life it'll make a difference in. I'm curious, who are your author heroes?
Oh, I have so many. I have like a list. I think top of that list is Zora Neale Hurston for me. Her work has been kind of, just such a huge part of my life, and then a part of my writing as well. So I think she's been the biggest. And between her and Toni Morrison, who kind of taught me that there's a space for me and for my story and the way that I want to tell it, the way that I need to tell it. So those are my 2 like big, huge, they're at the top of the list.
I don't even know who to pick. Like, honestly, my shelves are just full. I don't know. Maybe I should just pick William Goldman, I guess, because The Princess Will Save You. I mean, the things that he did and the stories that he told, not just The Princess Bride, but so many others. He had a really amazing way of tapping into humor and to bring various types of characters and stories into our world that are unforgettable. And I think, that's really cool that you can do that as a writer. And I hate picking like an old white guy, but he did those things, and now I'm gonna do them.
I don't even know if I can think. I have a terrible memory. So being younger, like the things that I remember reading are like The Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley High. And I had very commercial taste as a kid. And I would say I was very influenced by like the newer YA stuff. Like one of my first introductions to fantasy novels was Leigh Bardugo, like back in 2012, which is crazy. But I tend to like find a lot of like new things that I fell in love with. So like actually the first thing that popped into my head was a book that I think it just came out this year, Felix Ever After by Kaylynn Bayron.
Yes.
It's one of those books that I best adored. And so that's like a new hero.
That's wonderful. Kaylynn is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So do you all have a critique group or some fellow authors that you rely on for feedback, or even non-authors, family members, friends? Who do you rely on for those critiques ahead of time to help guide you?
I used to have like a writers group. I don't have that anymore, just because things have kind of like, the circle has to kind of get smaller, especially when you have things under contract and things that have to be kind of secret. So, but my oldest daughter, she's 20, and I always let her read everything I write first, and she'll tell me straight out, like, trash, don't even send it to anybody. Like, or she'll tell me that this is, she'll be honest with me, and that's what I'm really looking for. But and then I do have a couple like beta readers that get to see, things, when they're in a little bit of an earlier stage. So yeah, but I think that early feedback is super important. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that the feedback is important too, but I honestly, like in the last couple of years, my circle has gotten so small because I haven't had time. And so really it has become just my agent and my editor, as much as I hate that, because I love working with beta readers. I love reading it myself and, and sharing with friends, because it's such a thrill, and it's so good for your writing to have so many different eyes on it. But honestly, with deadlines, I have literally just had to do what I could do. And then my agent is a former YA editor. She did that for 10 years before joining agenting. And so, it's her business too. I feel like she's going to be very honest with me, and she knows, she knows the industry, she knows the category. And I'm hoping that now that I'm writing full time, I'll have a little bit more time to share my work with other people, because I won't just be like, oh gosh, I have to cram all this stuff in among everything else. Because we were talking about community earlier. I mean, that's really how you find your people. And even when you can't share your work all the time because it's secret, or you don't have enough time, it is really great to talk through things, or at least just beat through plot ideas and things like that with friends. And I do consider that to be really important writing work time that I still do. Like, even if I don't have time for them to read the actual work before I send it, I think that's invaluable.
I definitely had more before I was published in maybe like the first like debut year. And I have maybe one writer friend who I'll send. I tend to more send like the first 20,000 words or something, like the first quarter of a book, to like see if I'm on the right track or not. But the person that has always read all my stuff is my sister, because I started writing books really young, like when I was still in middle school, and she used to read them like as I wrote them. When I wrote them by hand, because I didn't even have a laptop back then. That was like the 90s. So she still reads everything. She's more of like a cheerleader reader, though, like a good job. And I think those are also very important too. Like, keep reading this, or keep writing this so I could read it, So she does it. But yeah, I'm sort of the same as Sarah, that a lot of it, like recently, like my agent is the only one who had read a certain project, just because you get busy.
Absolutely. With fantasy and sci-fi, world building is such an important part of the story. Setting is in a whole nother character. How do you deal with your world building and the challenges that come with that?
Cinderella Is Dead is set in kind of an established setting. Like, we have this, so when you're doing like a retelling or a remix, which is, more what Cinderella Is Dead is, it was important to me to include some familiar kind of guideposts, so that that you're in this world, but that it's not a carbon copy. And I think that for me, a lot of the world building comes first. I know that everybody's process is different. And sometimes it's characters first. For me, it's kind of like the environment, the world that whoever I end up putting there is going to be living in. And so I think it's important to establish that kind of early on. And I think it has to be detailed enough that you believe it, but not so detailed that it becomes, tedious and kind of boring. So it's always fun to kind of create. And then, so I have another book coming out next year, and it's not a retelling, so I had to kind of start from scratch. But and that's been a whole new kind of experience, writing experience for me. But I think it's I think it's just fun. It's just so much fun when you're kind of creating these new things, and you can kind of do fantasy is wide open. Like you can just do anything you want to do. It just reminds me of how much fun I have writing these stories.
In my case, I am one of those writers that finds the setting as I'm going. Like I definitely, I'm a hybrid plotter pantser, and I tend to focus more on actual plot beats instead of the setting, and then fit the setting around it. Like I shoehorn it. So in The Princess Will Save You, I knew that I wanted to engage with what William Goldman had done in The Princess Bride, as far as sort of creating these faraway fairy tale kingdoms that feel familiar, but they're not exactly what we know. And in this case, I didn't want to do the typical Anglican type fantasy land. You know, we've all seen in Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings and everything else where it's basically England, right? In this case, I studied abroad in Barcelona when I was in college, and I love the Iberian Peninsula. And so basically my continent in The Princess Will Save You is basically the Iberian Peninsula hacked off from France. And sort of that informed a lot of the world and the food and the names and the people and a lot of the topography and my way of thinking about things as far as the story went. And it was really fun to kind of engage in something that I was already interested in and make it have a little bit of a fantasy twist. And yeah, I really enjoyed that part. Like I really enjoy world building. And, you know, like Kaylyn, what you were talking about retellings, it really is fascinating, because when you do a retelling or a remix, you really do have to like engage with what people already have as far as their understanding of the story or their relationship with the story. And it's always really interesting to see how authors find their way into that space where the original was, and see how they can rework it. I think it's a really cool part of being able to tell a story like that.
I don't actually really like world building, which I realized later was sort of, I made a strange choice to write a fantasy trilogy, because when the first book in that series came out, Ruined, I kept being put on all of these world building panels, and I'd get up there and be like, I don't really like world building, just do whatever, like just make it fit, it's fine. So that I think I sort of shoehorn it, like Sarah said. I like with my fantasy novel Ruined, I wrote like a really fast draft and did like all plot and character and emotion. And then for the second draft is when I went in and I sort of like made the setting fit the story I wanted to tell. And that's probably how I'll always do it, because I know some writers, having been on all these world building panels, I know that some writers spend like 3 or 4 months researching and building out the world and all that. And that for me is just like not as much fun as building up the character and the plot. So I'll probably always do character and plot first.
I think that's great. And I think people sometimes forget that writing is an art. There's no one certain cookie cutter way to do it. And so putting yourself, a little bit of yourself into each and every book and having your own style, I think is the beauty of it. So now for my last question, what's next? What can we look forward to reading in the future?
I have a YA contemporary fantasy coming out next year, July 6th. It is called This Poison Heart. It is the story of 16-year-old Briseis Green. She is a young girl who was born with the ability to manipulate plants. She can make them grow. They kind of notice her wherever she goes. The grass is literally greener wherever she's at. So she is kind of struggling to keep this power in check. Her family is struggling financially because they have a small business, a flower shop called Breeze. And it's having a hard time staying afloat amid the gentrification of her Brooklyn neighborhood. So in the middle of all of this, Bree inherits kind of this sprawling estate in upstate New York, and She goes there, and the place comes with this really strange set of instructions. So Bree goes there to kind of uncover her family's unique lineage and a secret that is so closely guarded that its revelation may require the intervention of the gods themselves.
That sounds wonderful. Can't wait.
That's awesome. And we were all book birthday people on July 7th, right? So my next one is also coming out July 6th. Mm-hmm. It is the sequel to The Princess Will Save You, called The Queen Will Betray You. I had so much fun with these titles. And I can't say much without spoiling The Princess Will Save You, but basically it picks up where The Princess Will Save You leaves off. And Amarande and Luca, who were torn apart in the first book, are back together, but then to stay together forever, they have to be apart again. And so chaos ensues. And then in 2022, I have a sequel to my other 2020 book. Well, actually, it's a companion book in the same world. So the first book was Throw Like a Girl, and this book is It's All in How You Fall, which is about a near elite gymnast who has to quit because of injury, and her older brother's best friend decides to teach her the ways of other sports. So it's sort of like 50 First Dates, but with sports.
Oh, wow.
So the sequel to All These Monsters comes out July 13th, 2020.
You just missed us.
Missed it. And it's called All These Warriors. And I also can't say much without spoiling All These Monsters, but it sees the monster fighting team still out there fighting monsters. And the thing that I like best about All These Warriors is that it's a lot more romantic. All These Monsters definitely has sort of a slow burn romance. So if you're like, I really wanted some more romance, All These Warriors is for you.
Those sound amazing. And I want to take this opportunity to remind our audience to be sure to look in the comments for the links to purchase these wonderful books from Parnassus. And thank you all for joining us today. Please share this video. It will be available. And so please recommend it and share it and help spread the word. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful, safe rest of the month.
Thank you.
Thank you.